Okay. We are today's daf is daf nun Zion. We are going to Mitchell learn to daf Chesed base. Tomorrow we can learn Friday. Okay, the Halkha. Says the Gemara here. We finished the Mishnah of Zion on the base, and the Mishnah basically was telling us if somebody asked the Paris, we discussed whether this, if you swap them, somebody made a kainim on the fruits. What about the chalufin of those fruits, and what about the gedulein that outgrows from the growth from those fruits? So the Mishnah said it depends this way. The Ram learned if you said elu these, then you want it to be like hegdish, anything to do with them. You can not only what emanates from them, but also if you swap it for something else or any growth. But if you don't say elu stam, then just the fruit itself and not the chalupain. Or the difference of other shames, whether you say it's also bahana or whether you say it's also just ba'achila or betima. So now Gemara has an interesting question. The Gemara from Zayin base. The person says to his wife that your activities are forbidden to me. Koinim hein alpi, koinim hein lipi. The same discussion we had regarding fruits. Yishmol ish kvar yama. Interesting. You don't call Rabbi Shmuel as Yishmol ish kvar yama, but obviously he's a Talmud Chacham, so I'm not sure why there's no Reb in front. But Yishmol ish kvar yama. I'm the others say ish kvar diyama. Hella biyada, or maybe just came with a shaila, an innocent person came in holding in his hand bottle, a tzibula, an onion, akru b'shvius, that he took out of the ground in the year of Shemitah. In other words, that it grew in the year of Shemitah, which basically makes it asa. And then the nota b'shmius, he planted in the 8th year, so the ikar. Now remember, we learned in the Mishnah there's two kinds: there's zara kola and zara she'enu kola. That's most of the seeds they rot, but there are certain things like onions and garlic, capers, we'll see that they don't disappear. So the isa is still extant, but now you have a new growth. The new growth was all grown in the 8th year, which is heter. And what happened was in the 8th year, suddenly you have all these new leaves, and they outnumber the what originally was there. The hachi covered by this is the question. Gidul of heter. You have a case where the growth is mutter, the origin is also, and the question is, the kivan the rabba gedulav al ikra isa gedula heta mylins. So do we say that the gedula heta transforms that not only the gedulim remain heta, but the isa the onion, now the original onion that grew in Shemitah, now transforms into heta because he goes after the roiv. I like or no. Now, what is exactly the shayla of machlekes rishonim? The machlekes rishonim is many rishonim learn the growth itself is no question that it's mutter. It grew in the 8th year. The shayla is what impact does the growth have on the original onion or the original garlic? Does it transform into heta as well because the roiv is mailil leheta, or do we say no? That was also from the beginning. It remains us.
Say that the original bulb of the onion is like a moment. If you don't have that, you don't have the growth.
Yeah, but everything else is also onion. So the many Hashem says talking about where the original is no longer seen, because generally we have a rule that if there's no bittul, if you can see. But the Ran learns that the Gemara Shaila is sort of twofold. The Ran learns that no, the Shaila is the growth of the onion, just that it continues to grow, or the growth is a new mitzias. And therefore he says the shaila is both ways. Do we say that says the onion is also the growth? The growth is also us, because the growth is not a separate mitzias. The growth is the onion just continuing to expand. So you have isa that's expanding. So it's asa. Or do we say no? The growth is new mitzias, and if it's a new mitzias, it transforms also the onion, makes it het. Standing from the Rand, you don't need the original onion to disappear. It's not so much a rule of bittul that we normally say, bittul about b'roiv. It's more that because now this produced the heter itself, which is all attached, transforms. Yeah, it becomes new mitzias. He could also become new mitzias. That's a shayla. So I'll say first he went to the Kamei de Rabbi Ami. Lahada the other. Interesting. Shaili said, I don't know. Also, the Kamei de Rabbi Yitzchak when Rabbi Yitzchak decided to tell him the patient from the following case. The Amar Rabbi Chanina said, Teresa, Amar Rabbi Yane. Botzel shel truma. You have an onion from truma. So this is truma. Shenotu, that you planted it. and the Rabbi Gedolav al Ikri. And now you have new growth. You have new growth. So we say that what that mutter that is totally mutter. Now, what do you mean? The way that Ran learns that not only is a new growth not truma. No, you took truma, which nobody can accept a coin, and you planted in the ground. The new growth is not truma, but the original is also no longer truma. It's mevatel the ikir. But what is it now? So it's like tevel. It's back to tevel, right? Because the new growth was mevatel the ikir, eliminated the truma aspect of it. So now it's basically everything there is tevel, including even though the original was not tevel because you took the truma out. Still, the original now becomes also again. Yeah. He continues there, yeah. So I was saying, just lost the place. And what do you mean by mutter? Is tevel. How is it mutter? Mutter, because by tevel, you're allowed to eat achilas arai. Kolzman is truma, you cannot even eat a mashu on it. But now that it's tevel, okay, so you can eat achilas arai. What do you see from here? That the new growth, it has a bearing on the original. Klar. Says the Gemara, I don't understand you. Abime said, other said, Rabbi said, Shovik Martrain. So you, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, you decided to follow Rabbi Yanai, who's one opinion, and you left behind two other opinions. Man Neotrain, who are the two against it? So you're saying that the new growth, the Gedulin, is mile in the Ikr, right? Has a bearing on it. But I'll show you two halacha, two other Amoraim who said paket. Number one. Can you take a tree that's Erla, it's a year old, and you grafted it onto a tree that has, and in this Erla had some fruits on it already. And we know generally that Erla is bottled in Masai, meaning if you have 200 more than originally was, is bottled. Truma is in 100, 101, and Erla is 201. So what happened is you you took a young sapling or a young branch with fruits on it, and you attached it to an older tree that has fruits and so on. And now Bob paid is that young branch had a number of fruits on it. So the question is because the paid is there already. So these paid is already, that's the Ika, already awesome, right? Because they already grew B'Shas Orla. Is Afa Pishaisi for Messiah. Now there's new growth more than 200, more than was there originally. Nevertheless, also is forbidden, right? And we're not talking about new peters that are growing. We're talking about the peters that are already existing on the young branch. We don't say it's bottled. So what is it from here? That the new growth is not mevatel Ika. Okay, so that's opinion number one. One of the two new opinions that the new growth is not mevatel Ika. Another opinion, another source. Botzel should not to be kedem. You took an onion, you planted next to a vineyard, no, but that's called klayim. And then and then you removed. It's already you start to grow, even of klayim, the onions. And then you removed the kedem, you removed the source of the klayim. And then the new growth that came afterwards now is just onions, pure onions. There's no more, grapes mixed into it. Even if you had more than 200, more than them. So nevertheless, also forbidden. Why? Because since they're coming from the onion that already was usr, exactly. So therefore, the new growth is usr. So we see that the new growth is treated just like the ikr, not like you said before in the name of Rabbi Yanai that the new growth is mevatel in the case of a person planting through it. So you have one amoid against two. Why in the world are you passing Rabbi Yanai? That's the question. He then went back to Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami originally said he didn't know. Remember, he said he didn't know. Rabbi Ami heard all these things as a triggered something by him. He came along and said, I have another way of looking at it. And it goes as follows. I said the same Rabbi Yechon before, but this will be obviously Machlekes Amoraim Rabbi Yechon said. He said, Litra B'Tzelem, he had a liter of onions, and Shetikna, you gave the truma and the meiser, everything that you had to give from it, and then the zora, and then you planted it, now you already gave them truma and meiser from the original, and now there's a new growth. So you have to give Truma Meiser again. But do you give Truma Meiser only from the new growth, or do you also have to give Truma Meiser on the original? Now, the original, the Zari was not Kola. But because the majority now, the new growth, you need to get Truma Meiser on that. But the original onion, you get Truma Meiser before you plant in the ground. And the onion is still there. So let's say 9 liters grew and you have the original liter of the onion. Do you have to give Truma Meiser on 10 liters? You got to give again on the onion because the onion now is the new growth transformed the ikka to become like the new growth, or no? And what does it say here? Masaseres lifikula. You have to give meiser also on the original, which shows clearly that the new growth transforms the original and makes it like it is. Alma So this is now a pitch. Right now you have 2 against 2. I had to say that the new growth transforms the ikka. What Rabbi Yechon a minute ago said that you have the yalda that you attach to this kana, that the new growth has no bearing on the original, and the original is still awesome. To Rabbi Yechon said, I'm not happy with this. This is not a strong of right. Why? Maybe what are we doing here? We're being machmer. We're saying give true and mice also on the original leader. Maybe the chumra can be different. We'll say, you know what, the new growth will be vatalika, but you want to be makel. You want to say that the 7th year fruit, onion, which is usr, but because you planted on the 8th year and there's new growth, you wanted to be matted and say you're allowed to eat it. Who said? Okay, we move on. Element how the time says, we already discussed this before. Anything which today is forbidden and tomorrow will be permitted. So the case we had in Mordea was the case of an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, got mixed up with 1,000 other eggs. We don't rely on the laws of bittul. By Dovash Matirin, we say min b'min. If it's the same min, afilu be'el b'bottom. We had the long round before and down from the base. That gave us the reason why, because it's considered min b'min. Because here everyone agrees that min b'min is never bottle. But the question is, what's min b'min? And according to the Chacham, min b'min is that the legal status is also similar. This is much of today. This is much of tomorrow. Rashi in Beya says the reason is why eat it today and rely on the laws of bittul when you can wait till tomorrow and eat it. Yeah. So the rule is as follows: anything which has matirit, you're going tevel, you just have to separate it. Or ma'aser sheni, take it to Yerushalayim. You can be paid it, redeem it. Or hegdish, you donate on the hegdish, but you always have a way of overturning it. You can take away hegdish. Or chadash, wait till the 2nd day of Pesach, you're allowed to eat all the new crop. So all of these things, there's a time when it'll become permitted. In that case, even the slight amashu, even the slightest amount of that Easter got mixed with something else, we will not rely on the laws of bittul. The whole davar she'ein le matirin, but anything which has no matirin, going for example, truma. You can't once something is truma, you can't undo it. Now, even though you could be matir, you can be shoyal on your truma in the first place and start all over again. But there's no mitzvah to do that. The Gemara later on talks about when do we say doja matirin, when there's a mitzvah to go ahead and do that heter, or it happens automatically, like Yom Tov, right? The Yom Tov automatically becomes mutter. All of these cases, there's a mitzvah to give truma and mice, there's a mitzvah to take it to the shalayim, and so on. But for anything which has no heter, it's like treif, could go in truma's mice, or challah, but once you set aside, you got to give it to kohen. There's no way getting out of it. Or arla the first 3 years, or klaya keren got mixed up. Not just fruits that grew. Any fruits that grew within 3 years, come here before it's us. It's only new fruits. There is a shir. Yeah. Now, the Kiva Eger here asks a question: why don't we include yayin nesach? He says chametz doesn't bother me because chametz is also whether it's min b'minay or min b'sheina min. We're only talking about cases that only if it got mixed up with something very similar, it never becomes bottle. But chametz on Pesach, I don't care if it got mixed up with some similar or not similar, it's also b'mashil.
It's the matter for yayin nesach.
Sorry, there is no by yayin nesach. There is no. So second half. The yayin nesach also has no heter, right? And nobody's just asking a question. Why? I'll explain this question. The Gemara then says, you're telling me that anything which has no heter is never bottled. What about Shemitah? Shemitah has no heter. right? There's no heter for the fruits of Shemitah. You come year number, you have to mevire it, you have to destroy it. Come year number 8, we don't say, the fruits that grew in the year of Shemitah are mutter now. Once Shemitah is awesome. And yet, so according to you, it should be bottle in the normal rules of bittul, and yet there is no shir. That now we learned Hashviyas, he said as kosher who b'mina, that Shemitah asks even the slightest amount b'mina in the same way, in the same kind. That's what it asks. We're leading to our question, to our subject here. But the Mekiva asks on this. Okay, Shemitah, the Gemara's going to answer. Okay, let's get the Gemara's answer. First, the Gemara's sorry. He said to them, when I spoke about, when we say Shemitah, Shemitah is usher, even a mashu, only when it's double shesha matin. What do you mean? El it's before the time of burning. So what happens to Shemitah? You have to destroy it. That's the mitzvah. So that's the material. So we're talking about the first half of Shemitah before Pesach, whatever. The first half of Shemitah, when that if it got mixed up with other things, it's usher completely, even a mashu, because there is a heter here come the time of burning. But when do we say that Shemitah even is a dover she'ein lamatin? Is once you pass this man beer. Once you pass this man beer, sorry, aval achila has been nice and tam. But once you pass this man beer, let's say if the Paris or Shvis got mixed up with fruits of year 8, it's bottle whatever the rules of bittul are. The normal bittul, whatever it is, nice and tam. That's because only when do we say that a Shemitah got mixed up with other things? Is it also forever? Is before in the year Shemitah itself, or before the while you still have that in the midst of beer. Once Shemitah passes and it got mixed up with other things, it is bottled in the normal rules of bittul. So what do we see from here again? We see from here that you had an onion of the 6th year, came into the 7th year, it becomes a dover she'ein la matirin. And and we say that it grew a little bit in the year of Shemitah. That entire thing now becomes us, even a mashu. In other words, you took an onion from the year 6th year, it grew a millimeter on the 7th year. It's a mashu. The whole thing becomes us. So the whole thing becomes us. What do we see from here? That the new growth impacts on the original. Again, the new growth is the original because a mashu asks it. That's not only we got mixed up with something else. It itself grew a little bit in the year of Shemitah. It asks Iker. So we see that the new growth does have a bearing on the original. So question on those two opinions that said that it doesn't. Says Gemara again. Again, your original question was lakula. Your original question was that you took a 7th year onion and grew, and you planted in the 8th year, and all that new growth, does it make it now mutter? Here we're talking about the other way around. You took a 6th year onion, and in the 7th year you planted and grew a little bit. The whole thing becomes usher. That's l'chumra. And here. Now we already know that. We already had that before the Gemara. What are you asking again for? Because here is a double chumrah, and maybe that's too far. Why the double chumrah? Because not only are we saying that the new growth is usher, but we're going further. We're saying now we're going to treat it like a dover she'ein la matirin. It itself was mutter. This on the original onion was mutter, and now we're saying that this entire thing is considered dover she'ein la matirin and becomes usher. That's two chumras. And Moshe says, yes, maybe we do. Now Rabbi Kiva's question is, why are we asking a question only from Shemitah? That that you're saying that anything which is ein lamatirin is bottled b'nois and tam. What about yain esach? It's a dover she'ein lamatirin, and yet it's also b'mashu. He said chametz doesn't bother me because we're talking about in this place we're talking about things which are only also limited to min b'minoi, and chametz is also whether it's min b'minoi, min b'einimin. But yain esach, why don't we ask from yain esach? We also ask from as well. Well, yain esach would be a perfect example of food.
I'm saying that maybe we machmir in Nesach because of this chomer issue, the David Zor.
So others say yain nesach. We know that if you cook yain nesach, for example, it's no longer yain nesach. Why? Because it's not chashuv anymore. So it's not so much. So there is a din chashivas. Here we're talking about rules. We don't care what it is. We don't care the value. It's law. It's ein la matirin, and it's usher. And therefore becomes mutter. Over there, it's not the ein la matirin that keeps it usher. It's the chashivas, like you said before. There are certain exceptions where things are so significant that they don't. You can't. What the whole year bit was as if they're non-existent. But this is chashuv. You can't say as if it's non-existent. Anyway, the Gemara continues. So we have no proof one way or another. We have 2 against 2 basically now. 2 against 2, and it's all started by this fellow called Yishmael from the city of Krayama. Okay. Yep. Okay. Gemara continues further. Let's resolve from here. Now we listen to Mishnah. It's only if you have onions. Let's say you have onions from the 6th year. 6th year onions are permitted. And then it started to rain. You left it out in the field and it started to rain. But and things grew. Now it's growing a shmita. We said before that anything that grows in shmita, even a marshu, it asks the whole thing. But if you leave onions on your countertop, you leave it for a few weeks, you'll see their shoots coming out. It starts growing, the scallions and everything else. Now, if that's what it is, it wouldn't be the law shmita, it would be mutter. The onion is mutter. It's only if it grows from the ground. So
it means after they're harvested. If they've already been picked and now it started to.
Yeah, but you left it in the field, for example. You left it in the ground. You left it on the kitchen countertop. I'm talking about, of course, it's mutter. You left it in the ground. The question is, the new growth, is that from the ground? Is that the shafsa'aretz or shmita? So the status is shmita, or is it the status that this is part of the onion? So it says as follows. So let's say you left these onions on the ground with some and it started to grow. If it's dark, like a really dark green, that means it came from the ground. Then asurin. If it's a light green, then mutarin. It's permitted because we'll say it came from the onion itself, and the onion is a 6-year onion, which is permitted. He agrees in principle, but he says, what's the determining factor, whether it's from the onion itself or from the ground? He says, if the shoots are very strongly attached, and how do you test that? If you pull the shoots, the onion comes with it. Then, or you left it. You left the onion actually in the ground itself. You left it not on top of the ground, in the ground. Still, if you gave it a yank, if the onion comes out of the ground, that means these shoots are strong. It must have grown from the dirt. But if not, that means it's just growth from the onion and it's good. Connect done, and the same thing would happen. So that's the chumrah, right? You take a 6-year onion and you put it in the ground in the 7th year. And if it turns out to be that these new shoots are from the ground, the gedulin asa the onion as well. But I'm also going to be makel. If you take a 7th year onion, which is shmita, which is forbidden, and this happened in the 8th year, same test, then it'll be mutter because the new growth is an 8th year growth and it transforms the onion as well. So we see clearly from here, l'chumra, l'kula, the new growth has a bearing on the original. Doesn't you always. So the Gemara. Remember, it says clearly the geduli had to minus isa. We see here the new growth transforms the original. Says Gemara Norai, the dilma b'meduchanin. Maybe the new growth cannot transform the original. Over here we're talking about that there is no original. In other words, he smashed it with a mortar and a pestle. He completely smashed this onion before he planted it back in the ground. It was a 7th year onion, but he completely smashed it, and therefore it's no longer visible. It's no longer in existence. That's why it becomes bottle and mutter. But the onion is extant. The new growth would not transform it. Okay, no right from there either. Element hada from the following. It can be learned. Let's say you're standing there in the field and you're picking these vegetables. We'll see we're talking about onions and garlic and capers. Is hamanachesh im hakusi. Kusi is a yid, but you couldn't trust him in a lot of things. Mice and all that. True with mice. So if you're menachesh with a kusi, b'chasi is and chasi we'll see later is onions and garlic. So in other words, it's eina yizara kola. It doesn't disappear the seed. We are going to say we're not concerned that this kusi took tevel. In other words, he already had the original onion already was chayiv and truma ma'isa, and it just replanted it because then you couldn't eat. Then it's tevel, and once you already picked it and everything else, it's chayiv and truma ma'isa. That was the dinner by tevel. If already became you already brought it into your house, or if it's already piled up, now you have a chiv of truma ma'isa. You cannot eat the aray. But if you didn't yet complete it, you can eat aray. We're not worried that the kusi took something that was already chayiv and truma and ma'isa and planted in the ground, because then you couldn't even eat. All right, it's tevel. But you're allowed to eat achilas aray. You're allowed to eat that, and because fruits and vegetables and ma'isa is only midrabanan we are lenient. Otherwise, machlekes we hold that only dog and tirish pizza is mahatayra. And Rambam holds that even other fruits is mahatayra. But onions and garlic, everyone agrees with midrabanan because it's yerek. And yerek, everyone holds ma'isa yerek drabanan. There was other kinds of grains that grow in the field, corn and other things. According to Rambam, it's all mahatera. But definitely had to give Maisa because there's no way in the world the Kusi would give Truma Maisa. Shimon says, in Yisrael Choshu, let's say you're sharing with a Yid who you could suspect is not very careful. Al Shvi'is, he's not, a lot of Yid, unfortunately, when it came to Shemitah, they didn't have the strength to make their fields hefker and follow the rules properly. So if this Yid is suspected that he's not really following the laws of Shemitah, so nevertheless, the Mitzvah, so therefore, that onion that you picked in Shemitah, maybe he planted in Shemitah, and therefore you cannot eat it. But if you read the Mitzvah Shvi'is, if you go ahead, that you planted on the 8th year, or any new leaves or any new shoots that grow on the 8th year, is mutter is permitted. Why? Because definitely there's new growth, more growth in the 8th year than was there previously, and it's mutter. Some say that we just assume that. Some say that we know, from the case, we know that for a fact. What do we see from here? That the 8th year overrides the fact that it was planted the 7th year. And this is Lakula, another proof that the Gedulim have an impact. The new growth has an impact on the original. So remember, what do you see from here? I can conclude the Gedulim had the Malas Isser, that the new growth transforms the original Isser. So again, first of all, who told you we're talking about onions? When we're talking about something where the seed is gone, there's nothing there. That's why we only focus on the new growth, because there is no original. It's all gone. It rotted away. So what are we talking about? Tanya, we learned Eilen Chasir. What's Chasir is going to like, which are capers, Hashem, Knabel, and garlic, Rapsalam, and onions. And these are things that ain't Zarakala, that they're still in existence. Think about, okay, but maybe he went out of his way because he's worried about the Shemitah. So it comes the year 8 when he replants it, he crushes it. So even though these are things generally that ain't Zarakala, that's still in existence, he crushes to make sure. Exactly. So what are you talking about? We started saying that this person doesn't care about the laws of Shemitah, so he'll care in the year number 8 to make sure that he got rid of the Shemitah. He doesn't care about Shemitah. So no proof from here, because maybe we're talking about here, not that the new growth. You think we're focusing on the new growth. We're talking about in the year 8, you took this, whatever this vegetable was, onion, and you mixed it with a bunch of other onions that were not for Shemitah or other things. And therefore, we are lenient. Not because of the new growth that came out of the original. Say, what says what again? What are you talking about? Hamanachish ton. It says clearly hamanachish means you're standing in the field and you're weeding it out and you're taking out. We're talking about there's no mixture here. We're talking about the very vegetable. We're talking about the new growth versus the original. So it's clear from here that the new growth transforms the original. So we have 2 against 2. So, as a matter of fact, lame to have it to you. How can the two who we were so certain they were right? How can those two say that do not transform the original? Clearly, from there we see the new growth transform the original. We say that you were together with a yid who's choshel l'shviyis. Come to year 8, you replant in the ground. You can eat it because the new growth in the year 8 was mutter. Amar Rabbi Chizkiah said, Shanya, there's a difference between shviyis. There's a difference between shmita. Why is shmita different? In the cases of Rabbi Yechon, one was about Klaim and one was about Orla, right? You grafted an Orla to a thing, and they both said those 2 cases, or Klaim, and you pull the kedim away. In those 2 cases, the new growth does not have a bearing on the original. But Shemitah will agree. In fact, we can then, so the Rishmal's answer, everybody will agree that over there, the new growth, the 8th year, is going to transform the original as the 7th year. Now, why should Shemitah be different? I'll tell you why. Shemitah is different. You know why? What makes the Isur of Shemitah? Nothing that you did. It's automatic. So to undo it, there's nothing that you do. It's all automatic. So what? By planting in the ground, the new growth, just like it became ushered from the ground, it becomes mutter through the ground. But in the case of the Orla, when you grafted on the tree, you did a maisa. You put it into the tree. Or in the case of the client, you planted it. And because of in these cases, you did a pu'ula, therefore over there they say that the new growth does not transform the original, because you made it happen. It's like Mavatl Isel Chatchila. Somebody was trying to use that lotion. It's like you're trying to take away this. Here, you did nothing. Automatically becomes Asa, automatically becomes Mutter. But over there, you made the Isser, and now you want to rely on this new growth. It's like Mavatl Isel Chatchila, you can't do that. Says the Gemara, What about Maisa? How did Maisa, the Isura, the Karka, when we're talking about a case over here, we're going to learn about Trumas Maisa. So Levi, if you gave a Levi the Maisa, the Levi now in turn has to give 10% of that to the coin. And for him now, this Maisa became Tevel because he has to give Trumas Maisa. Big Machek is a shayne when we say Tevel Yechayiv Misa, is that only if, how far do we take that? Is it only if he didn't give Truma? But if he didn't give Maisa and all that issue, Maisa Sheni, and the Levi didn't give Truma's Maisa, there's no Misa over there. That's not even though we call it Tevel, it's not the same status. Or we actually say that it's Tevel until you take care of every single takana that has to be done to this food. But regardless, the Levi has a chiva Truma's Maisa. And what this Levi did was, he took this Truma's Maisa. Now for him, it's Tevel. For him, it's Tevel because he didn't give Truma's Maisa yet. The Surah de Karka, the whole in Maisa is something you didn't do anything, it's automatic. That it grows, you have to give Maisa, you give Truma. The aim de Karka, yet it doesn't have a kabbalah to Karka. You just said a rule, anything happens east of the ground, it comes back. What's the story? The time we learned. Lead to the Maisa, you took a liter. No, it's this Truma's Maisa, you have to give a liter of a quantity of a liter of Maisa Tevel. Shazara Bekarka, you plant it in the ground. Right? The Hishbricha, and now it grew. But now you have a total of 10 liters. So 9 new liters grew. You have to give Maisa. No, you have to give the original Maisa Mina Maisa, the original Truma Mina Maisa that the Levi has to give. You can't get away with it just because you plant it in the ground. And Ubishvis. Comes the year of Shemitah, there's no Chiva Truma Maisa because everything is Hefker. But you still have to give Maisa, the Levi, still have to give whatever chiyuvim are still left from the original, which is the Truma of Maisa. You still have to be called Maisa of Maisa. You still have to give that to the coin, and you still have to give that to the coin. In other words, all you see from here that the new growth does not transform the ikka and say, "Hey, you're no longer the original. You're a new item." Then that chiyuv of Trumas Maisa is gone. You don't say that. And but where do you give the Maisa from? You can't take it from here because 9/10 of this is potter from this Maisa. It's a Shemitah. So you can't give Maisa from that potter al achiv. So you have to give also, and also from year to year. Someone's trying to say. So you have to give from last year's produce to give the 10% to a kohen. But what do you see from here clearly? According to Cheshbon of 1 liter, clearly we see that the new growth does not have a bearing on the old growth, right? And even though it's all manakarka, your premise is wrong. Amri Maisa dignu the kagonim way. It's not the ground that makes the chiyuv of Truma Maisa. It's when you pile it up. Remember, while it's still attached to the ground, you know chiyuv, like we learned before. It's only the meruach. So when you pile it up, that's different. We're talking about Shemitah. There's nothing that you do. Everything that grows in the ground, Shemitah becomes is us. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll see you tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem.